Now when Jesus saw great crowds around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. A scribe then approached and said,
"Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go."
And Jesus said to him,
"Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head."
Another of his disciples said to him,
"Lord, first let me go and bury my father."
But Jesus said to him,
"Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead."
And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A windstorm arose on the sea, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him up, saying,
"Lord, save us! We are perishing!"
And he said to them,
"Why are you afraid, you of little faith?"
Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a dead calm. They were amazed, saying,
"What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?"
If you would allow me to have several more hours this morning, we could go through all the points here. There are so many, and we hit one of the things I guess we would call the difficult words of Jesus to understand, and we're going to unpack them, because they're really not that difficult when you understand what was going on in his time and how people spoke in those days. It's the beginning of another triad as we continue through Matthew's Gospel. And this one deals directly with expectations from discipleship. It's hidden in there. And if this was the first century, and either Jesus was saying this to us, or we were reading Matthew's Gospel after 60 CE when it was written, everyone would gather that. The environment today is different than it was in the first century. And we'll mention that in a few moments. And also because Jesus spoke Aramaic, everyone acknowledges that, in Hebrew. And when you translate from one language to the next, especially a culture-based language, as Aramaic and Hebrew are, you lose some things along the way. So we're going to try to put them back in. So one of the expectations of this passage is, what do we gain from following Jesus? Remembering first century, to be a follower of Jesus was not an easy life. It was a smart thing to do. Yes, it's a good thing to do, absolutely. But it wasn't one that was going to shower you with dollars and, denarius, since we're back in those days, and all kinds of goodies. In fact, you probably gave up more than you gained. For when people came into those starting Christian communities, as you have read, I'm sure you've all read the book of Acts, that you would sell everything you own, everything, and put that money in a community pile, and then the community would do things together. So as you're reading the Gospels and the book of Acts especially, everything's communal. So what would you gain out of joining this movement? Especially in those first 300 years where things were not all that wonderful with respect to the empire, the Roman Empire. So let's start with a couple of those hard words so we have a chance to explain it. And you know here, Jesus says, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Lay your head is the key there, which I have in red. First, a little culture, because it helps figure out where these things go. Jesus was what we call itinerant, right? He roamed around. So he would come to different homes, and people would say, "Oh, why don't you stay the night with me? If Jesus came to your house, guys, in the rear, would you let him in? Even with the dirty sandals and the shoes and All right, let's see. They're nodding. They're not saying yes, but they're nodding. And you would let him come in because hospitality was the thing you did. That was number one in your culture. And when a holy man, especially Jesus, walks in and says, "Hi, Anna, can I come stay tonight?" Your answer is absolutely. Problem is, Anna has a very small home, as each of us would have 2,000 years ago, and we would not have a room to give him. The no room at the inn actually does occur. So we would have to say to poor Jesus, "Hey, you can lie on the floor." And normally when you laid on the floor, you would prop yourself up against a wall. That's the way they did it. She might not even have an extra blanket or a piece of bedding for him to lay on. So he didn't have anywhere to lay his head, meaning he had no bed. But more importantly, lay my head is an idiom from Aramaic, which means I am poor. So you have a scribe who says, "Jesus, I want to follow you." And Jesus understands it as being, "Oh, do you want to follow me because you think I'm going to get free food?" Anna did feed me. That's hospitality. "I'm going to get all this free food and all this free lodging, and you're going to make lots of money." And the answer is no. He's saying to the scribe, "I'm poor. Don't follow me because you expect to get a monetary gain, because guess what? Sorry, Anna, not going to happen." So lay your head means I am poor. He's telling them that. Notice that there's no words after that about this scribe. Did he hang around or did he leave? Our guess is he left, because if he would have stayed, I should say, Matthew would have taken note of it. So obviously he was coming to Jesus for money. So if you're here because you're expecting all these coins, well, let's have dollars, coins would hurt, to fall out of this roof or the ceiling from heaven, not going to happen. I say dollars as in currency because it won't hurt as much. Everyone follow that? Still with me? Okay. Now here's the one that really throws everyone off. And this is, another disciple says to him, "Let me go first and bury my father." And then Jesus says, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." First thing to note, allow the dead to bury their own dead is not spoken of or referenced in the 5 major academic commentaries. Everybody skips it because nobody knows what to do with the thing. Let the dead bury their dead. Does that make any sense to anyone here? Absolutely not. However, it does if you go look at the culture and the language of the time. First, bury my father. Who would say that if Dad is still alive? Because in Jesus' day, in the culture, when a man turned around 70, he couldn't work the fields anymore. He couldn't take care of the animals. See, Dennis, you hit 70, and he says to me, "I'm going to retire." What's he do? He goes to work. That doesn't make any sense, does it, Dennis? Am I missing that? In his day, when you turned around 70, you didn't have the strength to move rocks, to move plows, to deal with the animals of any kind. So you stopped working. And the Aramaic idiom became, "My father is dead," meant he's an old man. He can't do it. I got to take care of him. So this guy is saying, "Lord, I want to follow you. I want to be with you. But see, I'm the firstborn. I got to take care of that." Wouldn't that be nice if they did that today? Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about Social Security and 401k. You just look at the kid and say, "Your turn. I took care of you for 20-some years. Your time to take care of me." Can anyone do that? That doesn't work today, does it? I'm getting near 70. Well, it's a decade away, but I want to make sure I'm ready. So I'm going to go to my kids and say, "I took care of you people, right? And if I made a bill, it would be pretty huge. I want that back." Isn't that fair, Dennis? Absolutely fair. No, that's the way it worked. So when you couldn't run the farm anymore, you gave it to the firstborn son. It's still yours, but you can't do it. And that's an expression. So he's saying, I can't follow you because I got to take care of my dad. I got to make sure the family's still working. And then Jesus turns around and says, allow the dead to bury their own dead. Now that one just throws you for a complete loop of what's going on here. However, you all guessed it, it's an Aramaic idiom. And at the bottom line, you can see what it means. Let the dead bury their dead in Aramaic means let others take care of their own problems. Wow, that does sound a bit callous. But we are dealing with a culture where the small cities and the small towns, remember, he's in the Galilee here. He's not in Jerusalem that has 30,000 people. He comes from Nazareth that might have had 300 people. That's about all they have today. He's born in Bethlehem that had even less. And when it's in those days, it's just like this area. You're all relatives, aren't you? Except those people from Baltimore. And me from New York. But you love us in here, don't you? So everyone in the little village, it could have been Bethsaida, it could have been Nazareth, they were all family. And they took care of each other. That's what they did. So Jesus is saying to the young man who says, I want to follow you, but I got to take care of Dad. Jesus' answer is, the village will take care of him. Because we're all relatives. He didn't have to say that part because everyone knew it. So he's not being harsh here. It's understandable what he's saying. I want you to follow me, that's great. But you know, we have all these other obligations. And Jesus is saying that if you're going to follow me, an expectation of a disciple, especially in those days, and it should be the same today, is you're going to follow Jesus and do his thing. And you're going to let other stuff go. Let the dead bury their dead. Let the village take care of the problem. Don't worry about it. Hopefully that makes more sense to you. That statement has bugged me for years until I was taught about the culture and the Aramaic of the day and started saying, it's got to mean something because God wouldn't put these words in. It didn't make any sense. But I'm telling you, go out and Google it. You will not find you should find my explanation because that's where I found it in the Aramaic. But most of them are going to tell you, we don't know what he's saying. He's saying, let others take care of it. And then you have the storm. And for those of you who remember Jonah, and I know Mick back there remembers Jonah because we went through it pretty carefully. This is an echo of Jonah. The actual verbs, if you go through the verbs, is the Jonah story. It comes right out of it. And in the same way, Jesus kind of takes it easy and falls asleep or is kind of relaxing while the storm's going on. And in the Jonah story, Jonah goes into the hold of the boat, and he's asleep while it's going on. The little difference, of course, here is it's about expectations. Meaning, things aren't going to be that great all the time. Just because you come to know Jesus, just because you're following him, does not mean the road is paved. It's Pennsylvania. There are potholes. Life's got potholes in it. You can't expect everything to go well. And especially for those early Christians, they could be killed. Thrown to the lions, crucified. All kinds of ugly things are going on. If you happen to have a nice government job, today it's nice. You can't get fired, from the government. I don't know if you guys knew that. Yeah, it's like impossible. In those days, if you worked for the Roman government or even Herod's government and they found out you became a Christian, you lost your job. Done. It's kind of intriguing. The other thing that's going on here is Matthew loves to show how Jesus connects into the prophets. We've been saying that he's echoing Moses all over the place. He's also now giving a little Jonah echo. And remember, Jonah was in the whale how many days? Somebody said it. Who said it? They get the gold star. 3 days. Johnny gets it. New fishing rod for him for Christmas. Oh, I almost gave your Christmas present one. Thank you. 3 days. And how long was Jesus in the ground? 3 days. Oh, you see, there's a little match going on here. And it's being identified. So for those who are learning about Jesus, you get to chapter 8, and he's identified as a true prophet. The last true prophet that came to Israel was 400 years earlier by the name of Ezra. The time of the prophets were over, and now we have a new prophet. And you know he's more than a prophet, don't you? But see, you hadn't cheated. You read the end of the book, didn't you? You didn't read the end of the book? Okay, because she's shaking her head, yeah, that means you read the end of the book. So if you're thinking about, and you're reading Matthew's gospel like a literary narrative, like a story, you don't know who he is yet. But now you know he's a prophet. He is so good. You know what else he's like? He's like Elijah. We like Elijah, don't we? He is the prophet of the Hebrew scripture, right? And he does all kinds of things with nature. And remember, he brought the thunder and the lightning down. It's a really cool story. And now Jesus did the same thing. So the day of prophets is not over yet, is it? Not at that point. Later on, it'll go into the Messiah. Later on, he gets identified as God. But right now, we're in chapter 8. We got 20 more to go. So he's identified as a prophet. So, bringing this together, and we look at it for ourselves today, here's the tough question. It's a question that I remember asking, is what does faith in Jesus get you? And you might be sitting there going, I don't have to ask myself the question, but you've got to be ready because people who are outside of faith are going to ask you that. Why are you going to church and listening to that joker up there out front? Oh, that's me, I forgot. Why do you do this? What does this faith do for you? It's a question that's going to happen. Your kids might be asking that question too. It does come up. And here's one of the most important things when you're thinking about your faith in Jesus. It's a spiritual thing. It's spirituality, not materialism. There are so many people who I've seen come into church and it gets to this prayer time, and I'm very happy you haven't done this, where they pray and they say, I want you to pray for me so I get my car fixed. There was a pastor who put that out on the York District website. I'm sorry, the Facebook site. And it's someone who should have known better. God's not going to fix her car. You got to go get a mechanic, right, Dennis? God doesn't deal in that. And there are people who joined Christianity back in the 40s and especially in the 50s when the religion was booming because all the men who went to war came home with Jesus. They had Jesus moments in the foxholes, they used to call it. And they all joined churches, and then more people joined churches, and then they expected material things, and that still happens today. And if you're following Jesus because you're expecting a nice shiny Rolls Royce to show up at your door or hit the publisher's clearinghouse, which I know is waiting for, doesn't mean it won't happen, but following Jesus isn't going to make it happen. God deals in spiritual things. Healing is a spiritual thing. Keeping out of sin. Think of the Lord's Prayer. Avoiding temptation. Those are spiritual things. Not that you won't get what you need. That's fine. It's what you want. I would love to have a nice convertible Mustang Cobra out there. But they're $100,000. Doubt it's going to happen. Maybe the market will skyrocket to 20%. They say it will next year. Then we might talk turkey. But I'm not counting on it, and I don't pray to God saying, push that market up. I really want this convertible. It would be nice if anyone wants to gift the pastor a convertible like that for Christmas. That didn't go over well, did it? Blessings from heaven. Remember, we've even talked about the treasures in heaven that you get. By following Jesus, you're following God's way, God's law, if you will. I see the Gospels, especially Sermon on the Mount, as Jesus saying, this is how God wants you to live, these words, and here's how you apply it to your life. I love the way he has interpreted the scripture to make it possible for us to live in God's way, to do it God's way. And you know what happens? God likes when you do that. And Jesus said, that's storing up treasures in heaven, because that's where you're going to be. That's the world to come after this. And you want those treasures in heaven. What those treasures and how they work, I don't know how they work. All I know is the Bible talks a lot about them, and I want them. So if you really want to get me Christmas presents, treasures in heaven, go out and do things that make God happy and make Jesus happy. That would be wonderful. And then I think about what goes on in church, and we haven't seen it here, but I'm telling you, Sandy and I have seen it in many churches where people show up and offer prayers for things like, I can't make my mortgage payment, my car broke down, I need a new job. And it doesn't happen, let's say it doesn't happen, because God deals in spiritual things, not material things, and then they leave the church. They were members, they show up, you never see them, they show up a couple weeks. I talk to them, oh, they're here for this, that, and the other thing. They offer these prayers, doesn't happen, never see them. We don't follow Jesus for materialism. And I think that there was a time, 20-some years ago, I remember coming into the church at the beginning of my walk with Jesus, and I heard that. Oh, now that you come to Jesus, you're going to get all these blessings. Well, that convertible hasn't shown up yet. But there were people that actually did believe that and said that on Sunday. And then when that doesn't happen, you know how it works. They get disappointed, they get disillusioned, and they leave. Just like the pastor, and I'm not telling you who it was, put on the Facebook, please pray for me because my car needs to be repaired. And there were actually responses of prayer to it. And I'm like, well, I'm not gonna be the bad one and say, yeah, that's not the way the Lord works. So again, ask yourself why you're here. And if you have kids out there, or relatives, maybe parents, maybe aunts, well, you're all cousins, so you probably have some cousins, and they're not here. Hey, I got tied in, so I'm tied in. Amy married a boy from Red Lion, born and raised in Red Lion, so I'm a relative of you too. By in-law, I'm sure I'm connected. Dennis just crossed himself there. Ask them if they believe in Jesus and they say, yes, I have faith in Jesus. Ask them why and see what they tell you. But also be ready to answer that question. So what does your faith in Jesus get you? Be able to say, I follow Jesus for or because, and tell them. The scribe and the one disciple wanted to follow Jesus, but they had other things to do. And that first one wanted monetary gains. It was told, not going to happen. And the second one wanted to put things before Jesus, and Jesus said, that's not the way it works. So maybe during this week you want to answer that first question for yourself. And sometimes it's a hard question because you probably haven't thought about it for a long time. It's one of the first questions you have to answer when you start in seminary and you're in the indoctrination course. You have to tell the group that's the answer to that first question. What does faith in Jesus get you, and why are you doing this? So think about it during the week. There will not be a quiz on it next week, I promise. This is something you do for you. So let us come together and sing to the Lord. And you know, sometimes the answer to that question for you are in these hymns, because all these hymns are prayers. So let's come together and praise God.